with appreciation. Oh, all right. The recording is on. Sounds great. I want to get us started with some housekeeping. First, I want to express just my appreciation to the Hearing Loss Association of America, this Rochester chapter, for having me and inviting me. Specifically, I want to thank Suzanne Johnston and Dan Brooks and Janet McKenna, Susan Miller, and Charlie Johnstone for helping make this happen. All of the coordination of advertising this, sharing the presentation, and just putting this all together. So much appreciation to the team as well as the audience this evening. I certainly also want to start off with some disclaimers that the information that I present tonight, I don't have any conflicts of interest. I'm not paid by any organization or brand, and that I certainly know that what I'm presenting this evening is up to date. Anything that happens after tonight, or if there's some revealing and really just groundbreaking new research, I won't be able to speak to that. I also want to say that some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight might not work for everyone. I'm trying to speak more generally to the audience tonight. So moving now on, I want to talk about the objectives. What I hope that you will all be able to accomplish this evening is to be able to identify at least two reasons why couples communication goes awry. Why does communication go off the tracks? I hope you'll be able to identify at least two of those reasons. I also hope that you'll be able to identify at least two practical strategies to improve communication. I hope that you have some takeaways on what you can actually do to improve communication in your relationship. I also hope that you'll be able to identify at least two, I call them insights. Maybe they're deeper things that you would be able to explore that might be able to help improve your communication. I kind of think about this topic as like an iceberg in the water. There's things on the surface that we can do, and then there's deeper things that we can do. So I'm hoping that you'll walk away with at least these objectives this evening. So, what's on the agenda tonight? Well, I'm going to introduce myself and share a little bit more about me and my background. We're going to talk about communication in couples and relationships. We're going to talk about causes for the breakdowns in communication. We'll also discuss strategies to improve communication. We'll talk about, like I said, those deeper level insights that you might want to explore to improve your communication. And I hope that we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A. So, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. If you know Punxsutawney Phil, the groundhog that comes out and tells you about the weather for spring, whether spring is coming or not, I live about 30 miles more into the cows and corn. That's where I grew up from that area. And my introduction to deafness and hearing loss in the community was my sister. My older and only sister is deaf. And so you'll see there, I'm actually the littlest one in that picture there. I did my undergraduate studies at Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. So I was once up in a snow belt before coming to Rochester. Did my terminal master's degree at Mount Aloysius College in Pennsylvania. And then I just kind of got really sick of the cold weather and the snow and said that I was moving to Florida. I wanted sunny weather. I wanted the chance for something more than what a rural community offered me at the time in my career. And I had $1,000 in my bank account and I moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Looking back on it, it was kind of a wild move, but I'm really glad I did it because that's where I got connected to Carlos Albizu University, where I did my doctorate degree. And I also worked at the Center for Hearing and Communication. The Center for Hearing and Communication might sound familiar to some of you as they also have a New York office. While it's in New York City, they have two offices, one in New York City and one in Fort Lauderdale. During that time, I worked as a mental health counselor and had the experience of working with audiologists and social workers and Access VR counselors. I really had the chance to explore the deaf and hard of hearing community from a very wide lens with a lot of different supports and professionals around me. And then I moved to Rochester, New York. At the end of your doctorate degree, you don't really get to choose where you're headed for your final year of training. It's kind of up to an algorithm that might match you at a hospital or your setting. So I matched at the University of Rochester. I did my predoctoral internship at the Deaf Wellness Center. And I said I was only going to be in Rochester for a year. That's it. That's all. And I'm headed back to Florida. Well, life had other plans for me. Rochester ended up keeping me. So I stayed at the University of Rochester. I did my postdoctoral studies there. I worked with the National Center for Deaf Health Research at the University of Rochester. I then transitioned into private practice. I've continued to work in the community and partner with various organizations such as NAMI Rochester. I've worked with RIT and the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. I also do some forensic work. We're not going to really get into that tonight, but I do work with the courts and attorneys in certain cases where hearing loss is applicable. And as you can see, I do have two certified therapy dogs through my connection with Rock Dog, and they do come with me to my office every day. So if I should ever happen to maybe meet you in that space, or you might see me about town, I do have my two certified therapy dogs, Atreus and Lucy, who do get to join me in this space. So that's a little bit about me. So, what do couples communicate about? Well, there's lots of things, but I at least wanted to kind of maybe give us some groundwork to talk about what do couples talk about or what does relationship communication look like. There's the things we talk about are verbal communication. That can be how fast we speak, how slow we speak, our cadence, our tone. There's also our nonverbal communication. There's a lot in nonverbal communication, our body language, our facial expressions, even our micro expressions on our faces, which are those quick little things we might do, like wink or like a smirk. Our nonverbal communication is also what we act on, it's what we ignore, it can also be our tone. What else happens in couples communication? Well, there's also about our presence. Like, are we physically present? Are we mentally present when we're communicating with our partner or our family? Being present is a big part of communication in relationships. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Also, in relationships, our defense mechanisms are there. We are talking about the things that maybe creep up that help protect our psyche and our ego and help protect us from feeling hurt. There's lots of defense mechanisms. I won't go into them too much in depth tonight, but there's things like repression, sublimation. Sublimation is like when we take a difficult feeling and turn it into something good and we turn it into good energy. Displacement is the kick the dog kind of defense mechanism. I might be mad at my spouse, but I take it out on something else. Regression is when we might regress in our behavior as a defense mechanism. Humor is also a defense mechanism, can be a healthy one. Intellectualization, maybe that's going into the logic of it and, maybe getting away from feelings and getting in our head too much. Those are all defense mechanisms, and those things show up in our communication and our relationships. What kind of things do couples talk about? Well, there's lots of things. I just put a couple out there to give us some groundwork for this evening. Couples talk about their children. They talk about activities. What are we doing this weekend? What kind of projects are we going to do on the house this summer? They might talk about family. That might include in laws, that might include extended family, that might be family, friends who have become family. Couples also talk about politics. They talk about religion. Couples certainly talk about finances, and maybe they also talk about pets. So that's all just to give us a little bit of groundwork about what do couples talk about and what might be things to kind of get you all thinking about your own couples communication. So oh, I went too far. Oh, sorry about that. So, what are some of the causes of communication breakdown? One is unrealistic expectations. That could be unrealistic expectations of our life. It could be unrealistic expectations of our spouse. It could be unrealistic expectations of ourselves as well. Those start to really impact communication when we feel like we're not even talking about the same goal or the same level of achievement or the same level of being together or what we're expecting from each other. So unrealistic expectations are certainly one primary cause of communication breakdown. Stress. When one of us or both of us are under a lot of stress, that can certainly impact communication in couples. Poor listening. I think we could certainly all agree that our devices make it a little bit harder for us to listen and to really be present with our family and our friends, whether it's the TV that's on, or our phones, or our Apple Watches that are dinging, right? There's a lot of things that can interrupt our ability to be present and really listen. So, poor listening, half listening, thinking you can do two things at once and still listen. I think those are some other parts of what causes communication to break down. Another piece that I've noticed in my work and in the research is bringing up the past. When couples experience maybe difficulty getting past something that has happened in either their individual past or their togetherness as a couple, bringing up the past can really cause communication to break down. Priority changes. Maybe we've had a shift in what our priorities are now. Maybe working was a priority and now we're shifting to retirement. And that shift in our priorities and our day-to-day life can cause communication to break down. Contempt. Contempt is one of what we call in psychology, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And we call them the four horsemen of the apocalypse because they can really hurt communication, whether it's at work or in a couple's relationship. Contempt. So I describe contempt as I know something about you that could really hurt you, and I use it when I'm angry with you, or I use it to get you to do something that I want. I know that it's sensitive. I know that it's vulnerable, and I'm just going to kind of maybe use that to my advantage, or use it to hurt you. So the contempt can be certainly one of the reasons for communication breakdowns. Defensiveness, always reacting with a defense or an explanation or a reason for something rather than taking it in. Defensiveness can certainly cause couples' communication to break down. Negative nonverbal communication. You'll see that in the pictures that I have on the slide, one of them is eye rolling. It might seem like such a small gesture, but it can really hurt communication when somebody rolls their eyes or turns their face away. That kind of not negative nonverbal communication can also certainly impact communication for couples. And criticism, just coming at things with a critical view, a judgmental perspective, or you don't do this, or I wish you did that, or, criticism. What I'd say about this too is that criticism pops up a bit in couples, maybe not because one means to criticize their partner, but maybe because somebody's really critical of themselves. So it just happens that they're also critical of their partner, or just being critical of themselves can be really difficult in communication. What are some other causes of breakdown for couples communication? Blaming. Blaming is another one of those four horsemen of the apocalypse in communication breakdown. So blaming your partner, blaming others, pointing that finger can certainly be a source of tension in communication. Criticism, I already mentioned that one, so forgive me for noting it twice. I guess I thought it was really important. Stonewalling. Stonewalling is also one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse in couples communication. Stonewalling is when a partner just disengages. A partner just will not communicate, will not respond, doesn't respond, ignores. Maybe they use humor, maybe they deflect, maybe they go outside, maybe they leave the house. But whatever it is, they're just not engaging in the communication. So that's stonewalling. Another source of tension in couples communication is superlative speaking. You always forget to put the other dishes in the dishwasher. You never remember to shut the garage door. Using those really strong all or nothing words like always, never, that can really also start to break down communication. When couples get busy and don't prioritize intimacy and quality time, we can get really busy in this world between families and work and volunteering and kids and pets and our parents and extended family. It's really hard to prioritize quality time and intimacy. But when those become less of a priority, that can start to really impact communication. Distractions, whether that's your phone, whether that's you're distracting yourself with work. I'll throw a little humor in here. I often joke that my husband and I are not married from August through the Super Bowl because he is a fantasy football guy and he's got two teams running, and we're pretty much not married on Sundays between August and the Super Bowl because he's just distracted. I see a partner look at another here. So I think I might have struck a nerve with the group, but he's distracted. He's not present. I have struggled to have him be present in some ways. All jokes aside, he's a fantastic partner, but I will joke that he's distracted. He's just less available when that's going on. So whether it's sports season or it's a project at work or whatever it might be, distractions cause us to have communication breakdowns. Changes in medical conditions. When there's changes in our hearing loss, changes with our physical condition, our backs getting thrown out, breaking a foot, having to have a surgery, all of that can kind of really get in the way with communication or cause us to have more to have to communicate about. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about some specific strategies for this group, but any kind of changes in medical conditions can also be a source of tension for couples. When apologies become rare and are limited in depth. So, when an apology just looks like, yeah, sorry about that, right? Or it's a sorry or my bad, right? When they become brief and short and they're maybe not really deep, or they don't have that depth of acknowledgement, they don't have that apology, they don't discuss solutions forward. So when maybe you're not thinking about moments to apologize or making an apology, or if you're keeping your apologies short and sweet, those can sometimes get in the way of communication. Assumptions and mind reading. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about with couples, because they'll say, we've been together for 35 years. We've been together my grandparents had actually been together for 70 years before my grandfather passed away. And so I would guess that my grandfather or grandmother would think that they could read the other's mind. But I hate to tell you that no matter how many years you spend together, there is no such thing as mind reading. So when you start to rely on your partner to say, you just know me, like you should just know, right? Or when we assume things about our partner, we think we know them really well. So he's just going to want that, or that's how he's going to want this done, or that's the color that she's going to want. For the paint. Maybe when you go to Home Depot, you'll be like, oh, she's going to want a gray color. That's just what she's going to want. So when we assume and we play mind reader or expect our partner to just read our minds, that can also get in the way for couples communication. Snowball arguments. Those are the kind of arguments that then everything gets lumped into it. Maybe we're arguing about the garage door, but now we're also talking about how you forgot to pick up dinner the other night and how you missed paying this bill the month before. So it just becomes a big old snowball of all the things that I've been holding on to all in one argument. Right? I call those snowball arguments. We lose track of what we were trying to solve tonight, and now we've just thrown in the last maybe 3 years or 3 months worth of gripes and complaints. So snowball arguments can really, really break down communication and take us off the rails. Resentment, if we aren't talking about those things that maybe hurt us or that we're struggling with that our partner has brought into our life, that deep holding can turn into resentment. And if we're not addressing that individually or in our partnership, that can certainly cause some tension and difficulty in communication. When emotions are high, when we try to talk about it now while it's hot and while we're feeling this way, and we're feeling that maybe anger is really driving us or frustration is really driving us, we've got to talk about it now. I want to get this solved. When emotions are high, having that communication when emotions are high can be really difficult because we're not, or we're maybe less able to be present and problem solve and really express ourselves in a way that's constructive. Individually breaking agreements. This is another one I see often in my couples therapy with relationships is they'll make an agreement together and say, okay, this is how we're going to handle the next time our child does this. Or that when this comes up, we've made a plan, right? This is what we're going to do. And then the moment happens and a partner went rogue, right? Partner was just, I don't know, I don't know, I just forgot, or I don't know, I just handled it. You weren't there. Whenever somebody in the partnership goes rogue and maybe individually breaks an agreement that the couple made together, that can really impact trust. It can also be really confusing. So I think that it's important to think about how, when an agreement's made in a partnership, are we both able to keep this agreement? Breaking agreements individually can really impact trust. Passive aggressive, and passive communication can hurt communication. Passive aggressive is the, "No, it's fine," when it's really not fine, right? There's that tone, there's that facial expression, there's that body language, like, "It's fine," but it's not fine. That's passive aggressive. Aggressive is exactly as you hear it. Maybe that's yelling, maybe that's moving into the room where your partner is. Maybe that's like waving your hands around, getting really aggressive. Maybe that's swearing, right? Getting really aggressive in your communication. And being passive, being a doormat in your communication is also frustrating. If you're the partner who never makes a decision and you're like, yeah, it's fine, or I don't know, I don't really care, or nope, it doesn't bother me, or everything's fine, or I don't bring up any conflict. Being kind of the passive communicator can also be really hard on a partnership because it doesn't feel like there's an engagement or an activation in the couple. Arguments that don't address the deeper issues. You heard me reference the iceberg earlier, and you can see it here on this slide. Sometimes I find that couples are arguing about, maybe we could all say, the silliest of things, right? We were arguing about where to go to dinner. It wasn't about where we were going for dinner. Maybe it was about that I felt like, he wasn't with me. He was distracted. Was on his phone when I was trying to talk to him about where we're going to dinner, right? So I think it's worthwhile to recognize that sometimes what happens in communication breakdown is that we're only arguing and talking about the surface things. We're not talking about the more deeper things like the attachment or the loneliness or the confusion in the relationship. So when arguments don't address those deeper issues, we find, my next point, we have repetitive arguments. Couples will say, we just keep having the same argument. We just keep going round and round in the same way every 2 months or every 3 months or every other week. It just seems like we're having the same argument. And that's often because we're not addressing the deeper issues, or we're not having constructive conversations where everyone's taking responsibility. So those are all additional pieces of what can be really difficult for communication in couples. And my last slide about the reasons for communication breakdown, one is called triangulation. I'm not sure if anybody's heard this term before. I'll do my best to explain it tonight and not be too therapeutic. But triangulation is when we bring a third person into our relationship, right? Maybe it's between a partner and a partner, but they're bringing the child into the situation. The child can become the rescuer, right? Maybe we've seen relationships or maybe movies or TV shows where the child is the one that's trying to keep, the parents from arguing or to keep the peace. And so I just put up one example of a triangulation. There can be lots of different kinds of triangulation in relationships, but it's usually when there's a third person or a third party. This can also be, I'll come up with a recent example from my past week working with couples. Exes was one, was, It's between a partner and a partner, but one of the partners kept bringing up someone's exes. And now all of a sudden, the exes are in the relationship. We're spending a lot of time talking about them. And that becomes a triangulation. That's now a third party that is in a marriage and in a relationship. So, triangulation is definitely something to explore more in couples therapy. But that can also cause a lot of communication breakdown. When there are boundary issues, this is also one of my favorite topics to talk about with couples is boundaries. Boundary crossing, maybe someone violates your boundary, maybe someone's not maintaining their boundary. They set it, but they're not holding it. Maybe someone doesn't have any boundaries. It seems like there are non-existent boundaries, or they're inconsistent. Sometimes this boundary is on, sometimes this boundary is off, and it's confusing, and I don't know what you want, right? So, boundary issues, that can certainly be another source of breakdown in communication for couples. And now we'll start to get into some of the stickier stuff like substance misuse, alcohol misuse, marijuana misuse, or any other type of substance misuse can certainly be a source of tension for couples. Infidelity, whether emotional, physical, or of any other kind, and certainly intimate partner violence, whenever we are starting to deal with the more serious issues in relationships like abusive communication, maybe physical violence, or creating an intimidating environment at home. Those are certainly and obviously sources of breakdown for couples communication. So, I was thinking about you all and my experience in working with deaf and hard of hearing folks, and what I've heard over the years in my experience working with audiologists, working with social workers, working with other psychologists, and certainly hearing from individuals in your community. What are causes of communication breakdown when hearing loss is involved? Some of the things that I've learned throughout the years are communication frustrations, whether that's having to repeat yourself or ask others to repeat themselves. That can be a source of frustration for couples. Misunderstandings. Did you say what? No, I thought you said this. And then maybe it leads to an argument because we thought they said this when in fact they said that, right? The arguments that can come from those misunderstandings or just having to spend the time clearing up a misunderstanding can be exhausting and frustrating. When somebody with hearing loss feels like they're having a hard time keeping up with a conversation, whether it's individual or group or in a larger setting, that difficulty keeping up often renders someone exhausted, frustrated, behind, and having to do what I call the work, right? I often find that folks with hearing loss are working much, much harder than folks with typical hearing in conversations. They are the ones that are accommodating us. And I think that that can certainly be a source of frustration in couples and in family communication. And I think I've noted it already, but exhaustion, just being exhausted from all of the management that comes with having hearing loss, whether that's bringing your family onto the same page with you, if that's adjusting your technology, that can just be exhausting. And where I call it like my cup, like if my cup is very full because I'm exhausted and I'm dealing with so much, sometimes my patience wears thin, or I'll call like my cup just kind of spills over, right? I might be less patient with someone or with my partner when I'm so exhausted and frustrated. Another source of, or another piece of information I've gathered over the years from working with the community and from individuals that is certainly, I think we can all connect with is the isolation that we experience when we're living with hearing loss. Maybe we withdraw from activities because of the exhaustion, because of the frustration, because of embarrassment, for whatever reasons that might be. Maybe we purposefully withdraw from communication. Long distance relationships might start to take a hit because if I have to use this technology or we have to talk on the phone, that's maybe really exhausting for me. So I just maybe don't keep in touch with my long distance relationships as much or in the same way. In hobbies, maybe we start to kind of pull away from hobbies because sometimes our hobbies involve other people, like a knitting circle or a crocheting circle or a quilting circle. Maybe we're doing that less because our hearing loss impacts our ability to enjoy our hobbies because of the communication that is involved. I think some other things I've learned over the years working with the community is grieving. The grieving that happens when you live with hearing loss, whether that's each time there's a change with your hearing loss, or maybe that's just grieving your sense of self or the life that you had imagined for yourself. Maybe, I guess I'll bring my own family into it. I know my mom and dad are aging differently, and I think they are certainly going through some grief in what they had expected retirement to look like, what it actually looks like, their different abilities in this retirement stage. They're figuring it out, and we're problem solving, and we're trying to figure out a way forward. But there was some grief involved in like grieving what they had expected versus what is possible. So I think there is grief in this as well. Whenever a partner with hearing loss refuses help or they refuse to change their methods of communication, or if a partner refuses to change their way of communicating with us, that can certainly strain a relationship. I like to say that if the effects of hearing loss in a family and in a relationship, as well as compassion, goes both ways. It doesn't happen in isolation. It doesn't happen in a silo. Maybe we'd like to think that we can keep it all to ourselves and it's not going to impact anyone. But that's not the case. It usually goes both ways. So if we're struggling, it's likely our partner is struggling. If I need compassion, it's likely my partner needs some compassion too. I'd like to think of it as it goes both ways. It doesn't really happen in isolation. And it certainly with coping with hearing loss and communication in couples, it certainly impacts mental health. As you can imagine, isolation, withdrawal, exhaustion, and frustration certainly takes a toll on our mental health. All right, so now we're getting to the good stuff. What are some strategies to improve communication? I promise to give you all some takeaways. What can we actually do to start to improve communication? One thing is I strongly recommend seeing a couples and an individual therapist. A lot of people will think that, well, we're seeing a couples therapist and that's good. Yes, that's a great step. And it's really helpful to see individual therapists too, because healthy individuals make for a healthy relationship. So we often have to do the individual work while we're doing the couples work, we say it. Schedule quality time together and stick with it. Make it a date on the calendar. Book it out. Protect that time like you would a doctor's appointment. Protect that time like you protected your time this evening to join me for this presentation. It's not just, oh, maybe we'll go out Friday night. Like, really schedule it and stick with it. I recommend complimenting your partner. I don't know, does that sound like something that happens maybe when we're in the honeymoon stage of things, and maybe over the years we kind of forget that, but maybe it's like, I really like that shirt on you, or that color looks great, or oh, that haircut looks so sexy. Something cute, right? Say some sort of compliment to your partner. I think, again, we get busy with our lives. We assume that our partner knows we love them, and we just forget to put it into words and to put it into a compliment. You'll see I added the compliment, I love you more than pizza. I tell my husband that all the time because I really, really, really love pizza. So I'll tell him I love you more than pizza. Substitute you statements for I statements. You always, you never, you don't, you're not available to me during football season. Turn it into I feel that we're less connected. I miss you. I wish we could spend more time together. Turn those you statements back to I statements. That's usually lends to for a much more constructive communication. Don't assume, clarify with curiosity. So if you ever have a question, I would rather you come to it with, tell me more. That's a strategy I often give couples who work with me is I tell them to act like me at home with their partner. Do some of the things I do, like, tell me more. What do you mean by that? Could you give me an example? Right? If you can lean into your partner with curiosity rather than just assuming that you know what they mean or assuming their intent, that can often be a lot more helpful, especially for difficult moments. I try to lean on curiosity when I feel, I'll say the word triggered, right? If I'm like a little irritated, I'll be like, "Oh, right. Tell me what you meant by that." I'll try to refrain from reacting quickly or assuming the worst of my partner, and I will do my very best to use curiosity. What did you mean, babe? What was that? Could you clarify that? Could you re-say that?" So try to come to it with curiosity. I love sarcasm. I love a good sarcastic joke. However, the use of sarcasm is just a playground for communication breakdowns. And especially if we're having maybe a tense week or we've been just disconnected or we've been really busy, sarcasm can just be like a little off sometimes, right? Sometimes our partner can use it and it just doesn't land right. So I think it's worthwhile to just take a look at that, especially during difficult times. This is one of my favorite strategies. I give it to kiddos and I definitely give it to couples. So ask for try again opportunities or offer your partner a try again opportunity. What I mean by that is if I say something and I hear myself, I'll say, hold on, let me re-say that. Give me another chance. Let me fix it. And I give kiddos that I work with the same thing. Like they'll say something and it might sound really harsh about themselves, and I'll say, try again. Give me that in a different way. And sometimes that can give us a chance to fix it in the moment and repair it just enough to keep communication on the tracks. Or sometimes we can say to our partner, do you want to say that another way? I'm going to give you a chance to say that differently. Or I'm going to give you a chance to say that without anger, please. Right? Give your partner the chance to fix it and ask for it yourself if you need it. I love a little sweet spontaneity, a post-it note in the lunchbox, a note in your partner's suitcase when they're traveling, a little sweet spontaneity. It doesn't have to be a big night out. It doesn't have to be a lot of money spent, but just sweet little spontaneity can really go a long way in improving communication for couples. This was one we talked about was when apologies are short and they are maybe not deep. There are ways to improve your apologies. So if that might be an area for yourself, maybe really think about how you could improve your apology, like acknowledge and act on your opportunity to apologize, remove the but. I'm sorry, but you, right? Or I'm sorry, but the word but just totally negates anything that you just said. So take the but out of it. Keep focus on your actions, not the other person's responses. You can also improve your apology by offering a repair that fits the situation and follow through. Sometimes couples can get off the rails whenever maybe the repair is, um, I don't want him to take me to dinner. I don't want him to buy me jewelry. I want him to remember to do the laundry the next time I ask. So maybe pick a repair that actually fits the situation rather than a repair that's over here in the left field. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo the apology. Don't overdo, I'm sorry, babe. I'm so sorry, babe. And then a text the next morning. I'm sorry about that fight last night. There's no need to overdo it on an apology if it's a genuine one. Don't get caught up on who started it or who is to blame. I see that happen a lot. Well, they started it. Well, I finished it, or he wanted to finish it. And so try to stay away from that, as we call it in psychology, a demon dialogue. Try to stay away from that. And I also encourage you to look at, don't apologize to silence the other person. Sometimes you'll see a partner apologize just to get them to stop, right? I said I was sorry just to get my partner to stop nagging me or get my partner to stop yelling at me. So apologies shouldn't be just to shut the other one up. Consider apologizing, or I'm sorry, consider if your apologizing helps you feel better, but hurts somebody else, right? Apologies are meant for both, not just for yourself. Resist asking the hurt person to forgive you. Do you forgive me? Will you forgive me? Please forgive me. That can add extra pressure to your apology, and often doesn't really work. And certainly, last but not least, if you're offering an apology to another, forgive yourself and offer an apology to yourself. We're all human. We all have moments of getting off track. Some other specific things for the hearing loss community that might help improve communication for couples is pay attention to your eye contact. I'll say this, having grown up with a deaf sister and in a household where hearing loss and communication was important, if I'm in, let's say, an activity with my friends or even with my husband, I really don't like if we're not looking at each other. I don't like if he's off in the other room with his back to me, or if he's just turned, to the side. I want that eye contact. I really, really crave that and find that really important in communication. So couples with hearing loss know that eye contact is really important. Pay attention to your lighting in the room. Do we need to maybe turn the lights up or down to help us see each other's nonverbal communication, see each other's facial expressions? Distance. Are we so far away from each other? That's one thing that gets on my nerves. My husband has a mumbling voice and a low tone voice, and he'll often say something to me with his back turned across the kitchen, and I just want to strangle him because that is just, it's like you're talking to the other side of the room. I'm not even there. So maybe paying attention to distance when you're trying to communicate with each other. Volume, clarity, the pace in which you're speaking. Maybe pay attention to your positioning, your body positioning. Are you near a fan? Are you near something loud? That is always important. Background noise. I hate whenever a TV's on in the background, or something during a family dinner or during, Thanksgiving when we're all trying to talk to each other, but the football's on in the other room, and the background noise can sometimes be so hard for couples and individuals with hearing loss. I see some other faces. Some other people may be making some faces at my comments. So I think some of my points might be landing with you all. And mouth-related distractors. My husband has a beard, and my sister, being deaf, she does rely somewhat on, we sign in our household mostly, but she does try to read extra nonverbal communication, and my husband's beard is no help for that. So paying attention to do you have gum in your mouth? Are you chewing your nails? Is there a beard? Does your beard need trimmed? Is your mustache really long? Is that distracting? Those might all be things to think about. Or as a female wearing brightly colored lipstick, and that's just too much if you're trying to maybe do speech reading. So I think it's worthwhile to think about those mouth-related distractors. I think some other strategies that individuals with hearing loss have taught me is that it's more important sometimes to change your phrasing rather than to just keep repeating yourself. Maybe certain speech sounds are less accessible, so you just repeating yourself doesn't help me. Say it a different way, and maybe it will land differently, or I could understand it better. Say the person's name to improve focus. That's something I do all the time. If I have the chance to know someone's name in a conversation, I will say, "Oh, hey, Christy," or I'll thank our waiter if I caught their name, because I think saying someone's name does help kind of center them to the conversation and helps them know that you're going to be speaking to them. Another strategy is to avoid interrupting, talking over each other. That's certainly another way in which we can improve communication when there's hearing loss and any of those factors at play. Some other strategies to improve your communication: check for mutual understanding. So just to review, did we agree that we are getting the bigger pool? Or did we both agree to the brown colored stone? Just check in for that mutual understanding. Consider your nonverbal cues. If you're being passive aggressive, your words might be saying fine, but your body language is not. To someone with hearing loss, that can be really confusing because they're trying to put your speech and your spoken language with your physical nonverbal cues. So sending mixed messages between your words and your body language can be really tough. Avoid sudden changes of topic and try to acquaint the listener with the new topic. So I want to talk about the patio, or there's something I really want to talk to you about. Try to transition the topic rather than just kind of topic bomb and bring something new into the conversation. Recognize that it's hard to express ourselves and ask others to express themselves when they're ill and they're not feeling well. Maybe it's a timing thing. Like, I'm not feeling great. I really don't feel like I can put my words together right now. Maybe we need to give each other a pause when somebody's not feeling well. Learn about and use assistive technology together. Just because one person in a partnership might have hearing loss doesn't mean that they should carry all of the burden of figuring out that technology. Maybe you can do it together. Maybe you can learn about it together. Maybe enroll in any sort of oral rehab together. Bring your partner into what you're doing to try to improve your communication and your hearing abilities. But bring your partner into it. You don't have to go alone. I also suggest being patient with one another. If I could turn patience into a pill, I would buy stock and I would be rich. But patience certainly takes us a long way. And try to plan together. So for Thanksgiving, we're just gonna like not have football on, right? Can we just not do that together? Try to plan your communication and try to plan what you need together. Don't put it all on one person or the other. And involve and inform others. I love a good family text message before Thanksgiving gets started that says, "Yeah, hey guys, we're just not going to have football on in the background because it just really is difficult for communication." Right? Like just a nice family text to get everybody else on the same page. If you're hosting, you can set that rule. But maybe it's more about family conversations. Can we just all agree to ask Aunt Rhoda not to bring the noisy dog, right? Or something like that that might help improve the communication that we might have. So, one thing else that I promised you all was, what are some of the deeper insights that you might want to explore to improve your communication? This is the lower end of the iceberg that we talked about. Maybe we need to take a look at how we were raised. What kind of relationships did we see? What kind of relationship messages did we take with us as we grew? What are our attachment styles? Another question you might want to take a look at for yourself is, how profound is your awareness of others? Are you really thinking about what others might be thinking or feeling or needing around you? How deep is your awareness of yourself? How much time have you spent with your own thoughts and really been with yourself? I think that's something worth thinking about. Sometimes the deeper issues that come up for couples is they're afraid to be vulnerable because they're really afraid to lose one another, really afraid to trust one another and be close with one another. Maybe there are some strategies that you used to use that don't work anymore. Are you really willing to look at the negative parts of yourself? Because I think we often will all want to shy away from anything that we would have to look at for ourselves that doesn't feel great. So, one thing I often see in couples work and in therapy is people really try to avoid having to look at the icky parts of themselves. Is your mentality a negative mentality? This relationship's just not going to get any better. It is what it is, and I just have to accept it. Or it's fine. I hate that word. It's fine. It's good enough, right? Maybe that mentality is holding you back or holding your relationship back. Some other deeper stuff to be thinking about is, our relationships are really our greatest reflection of ourselves in a mirror. So relationships are tough because it's how we look at ourselves. Are you really committed to growing and changing? Are you a perfectionist? I hate to tell you and break it to you, but there is no such thing as perfect. So sometimes being a perfectionist gets in the way of relationships and couples work. Comparison. Oh, what a downfall of social media. Social media has led so many of us to comparing, or an old phrase was keeping up with the Joneses, right? Maybe we were just always comparing ourselves to the neighbor, to our brother, to our sister, to our best friend. Comparison is certainly going to be a source of contention and difficulty for a couples and communication. I love this phrase, talk less, listen more. And certainly, is there any parts of you or yourself that you're really in deep denial about and really trying to avoid? Those might be some things for you to really look deeply with, either with yourself, with your religious advisor, with a therapist, to really start to think about if those might be some things to change for your couple's communication. Last but not least, I thought I would just wrap us up before we move into question and answers about lessons I've learned. I've learned many in my years of work with couples, but these are some of my favorites. Communication about communication, it's also called meta communication, is important at all stages of life. I call it, we're not just talking about the meat and potatoes, we have to talk about the dish that it's in, right? We have to talk about the way we talk to each other before we can talk about the tough stuff. Valuing being right over your partner's feelings and the relationship often leads you to being alone. You can be right all you want, but you might be right over on Right Island all by yourself. Boundaries are not only for other people, but they're also for ourselves. Asking for help and accommodations is brave, and you have no idea how many other people around you could really be benefiting from whatever you're asking for support and your accommodations. We call it kind of a hearing loss gain. Closed captions. How many people out there in this world that might not have hearing loss are using captions, right? What a gain that the hearing loss community has given so many others that they get to benefit from captions. So asking for captions or asking for what you need is very brave and also could be helping some other people around you that you don't know. Difficulties at the individual level also impact your relationships. I can't tell you how many times I've heard an individual say, I'm taking care of that. She doesn't need to worry about that. Or that's on me. My partner doesn't need to handle that. It's not quite how it works. You can't just keep those things to yourself. And last but not least, share your story. You might be really surprised how much it provides you meaning and helps the other people around you. So you might think like, oh, what does my story or my experience, how would that help anybody? It's just me. You'd be surprised how much sharing that can actually make a difference to the other people around you. And as we move into question and comments, I just want to thank you all for your time. Thank you all for your ears and your attention. My contact information is on here, but I thought we'll move on into question and answers. So I'm going to pull up the chat just to see if there are any comments in the chat. Oh, Marcia says she's an Allegheny grad. Oh, go Gators. Yes, go Gators. Suzanne says compliments can include genuine thank yous for things that our partner does to contribute to the relationship. Absolutely. I like to call that acknowledgement, right? Acknowledgement can be a compliment. Absolutely. And Suzanne said, redundant messages can provide your partner with additional information. I'm going to Wegmans to buy milk for breakfast versus I'm getting milk. Emphasizing keywords can also help. Certainly. I love that. The more detail, maybe the better from time to time, for sure. I'd be happy to open up the conversation either on chat or otherwise if the audience has questions or comments.
Dr. Fox,
Yes.
could you stop sharing screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And if those of people remain in the connection, we're willing this going. So go ahead if there's any questions.
Yeah. Suzanne, sure.
Yeah, just a quick question about if there's been any research to do with the interaction between individuals, couples, when one person is hard of hearing or deaf versus the hearing person. Is there sort of a dominant passive male, female? If the relationship there, I have to believe in many cases that some people with hearing loss don't want to advocate for themselves too much, and feel like they're a burden on hearing people at times. So I'm wondering if there's any research out there that has looked at any of that, you know?
Primarily, the research that I'm familiar with in that avenue is around intimate partner violence, that has explored the power differential between hearing partners and deaf and hard of hearing partners because of the access issues, as well as feeling like a burden, or because of the different hearing statuses. One partner has more access to information than the other, and it can lead to abuse of power, and control. We could spend a whole hour talking about that. But yes, there is some research out there. It's primarily in the intimate partner violence arena, which I know that puts kind of a sticky layer to it that maybe doesn't apply to all. But that's where the research has been mostly in that area. Great
Thank-
question. Other questions, thoughts, observations?
Dr. Fox, I see our organizer, Dan Brooks, is now online.
Yes, hi, Dan. I saw Art raise his hand. I thought Art had a question or a comment.
I just wanted to comment that having been married 60 years and having had 7 children, you hit off most of the key points, very true to reality.
Oh, I did? Well, that is certainly a compliment from an expert. I'll take it. Thank you. I appreciate that, Art. Thank you so much.
We were good at it, but we sure figured out ways to screw it up. So,
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
thank you.
sure. No, thank you. I saw the Crystal family. Did I see a hand up there? Oh, you might have to unmute yourself.
Here we go.
There
How's
we
that?
go.
All right, well, I wear hearing aids, and my wife Cheryl has cochlear. And I think one of the communication problems we have, I hear, I guess, I think it's as if something's on TV, maybe it's a poor example, and it's loud for me or not loud for her, or vice versa. So I'll take my side. She would have her side. Why is that too loud? And then I can't hear it. You turned it down. Even in conversations in the same room where one always might be turned the other way, and you say, "Let's go to the store." And what you say? I'm a bore. I don't know, just things like that. It just and then we just sometimes just give up. Well, it doesn't matter. It's not that important for this very conversation, but otherwise, it is important.
Yes, you're talking about like how that misunderstanding can lead to isolation, right? Like then I'm going to go watch TV in this room because this is my volume. I'm going to go watch TV in this room because it's my volume, but then we're not doing it together, right? So
Yes.
that's what we mean by to accommodate ourselves or others. Sometimes it does leave us isolated, right? And you've seemed to figure out a way to have some humor about it, but it is also tricky, right? It is sticky.
The captioning is very good on TV too. When you see those things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uniform there, we could just read and go. That helps a lot.
Yes. What an interesting experiment to watch just an entire series on captions only, right? Maybe that's what we agreed to.
Yes.
I like that. Suzanne, I saw you had your hand up. Thank you so much for the contribution. I appreciate it. Suzanne?
Yeah, another quick comment about some of your content, which I thought was great. I thought it was wonderful that you made the point that the depth of conversations diminishes, especially I think for a couple of reasons. One is with hearing loss, you're just exhausted and you just don't want to put in the effort to have a deep conversation. The other piece is something that I first noticed when I developed a hearing loss is I learn a lot about what's going on around me and what's happening in my environment by listening to side conversations.
Mhm.
Suddenly you can't hear side conversations anymore. So again, it's very isolating, and you really don't, you get this sort of superficial level of what's happening around you rather than really understanding what's going on.
Yeah, I'll call those like information gaps. I think of it like like a piece of Swiss cheese, right? It's like maybe I'm getting bits and pieces, but there's holes somewhere, whether it's the big content part or it's these side conversations or this final detail, right? So I think of it like a piece of Swiss cheese kind of in the way you were describing it, Suzanne. Yeah, and the depth of communication. If someone has to slow down their communication or use a device or use captioning, maybe they just don't elaborate as much because they think they are accommodating the person with hearing loss when in fact they're withholding information. Certainly. Other thoughts, comments, things to share? Art, sure.
One of the real downers is when the other party says something and you don't get it, and they say, "Well, that's not important anyhow," and just walks away. And that's a real isolation problem, because you know it's important at some level, and now you're left out of the conversation on that one. And
It's
just a comment on TV listening at various levels. As you know, as luck would have it, my wife has excellent hearing. And my hearing, of course, is lousy. And we had negotiated a certain level, and some of the folks in the tech team found a thing called a Serionic TV listener, which is a little device that has solved that problem because it can put the sound right next to me for my hearing, and it doesn't bother the people in the room. So it's those kind of assistive devices that can really help out when you're into that, TV volume problem.
yes. And I really appreciate what you said because it's not just like a dismissal of the information we're seeking out when we ask someone to repeat themselves or to say it again, but it's invalidating to like my existence, right? That might sound very deep and might sound a little existential, but it's almost like I just don't have a right to be here to take up space if you're dismissing me and invalidating my right to be in this conversation, my right to be in this family, right? My right to be here. So it's deeper than just a dismissal of information. I think it hits much deeper for some, for sure. And yes, those devices, I think something I really appreciate, I'll say about my husband coming into he had never really been exposed to individuals with hearing loss before, but being a mechanical engineer, he loves to learn and tinker with new stuff. So he found that his curiosity about devices is what brings him closer, right? While he doesn't have personal experience, he really is invested in learning more about what's available to my family members. And that's the way he's contributed to that. So if you or your partner can take a cool approach to this, right? Like, I want to learn about the latest and the greatest. I want to figure this out. Look how cool this is, right? I think it's about changing the attitude towards devices and accommodations. Other thoughts, questions for
Just a quick comment along the line, use that we're learning a lot from our grandkids. They're in a different learning process than what we were exposed to at those ages. They're 9, 11 years old. So we find it joyful and enlightening when they can share some things that they learn and how they commit to the learning process.
Mm-hmm.
We're Rochesterians. We moved from Rochester 6 years ago. So we're very familiar with Rochester. We miss it and I have a lot of friends. It's a nice city.
Yes. Yes,
I
absolutely.
graduated from U of R as well.
Yeah, excellent. Yes. Yeah.
Did you tell them where we live now? No.
I didn't say. Cheryl wants to tell you where we live now.
Oh.
We live in Beaufort, North Carolina, and Cheryl's sister is just 20 minutes from us. She too worked in
Oh,
Rochester, and she came here in retirement, and we kind of followed that way.
yeah. Yes.
Dr.
And hopefully here in Rochester.
Fox,
Yes, yes.
I looks like Mike Quinlan has his hand raised for a question.
Yes, I see that. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, a couple of points. One is I think that being hard of hearing adds another layer to communication. Number two, if you are hard of hearing, I think it's important at what stage of your life you became hard of hearing. In my case, my wife was around me for about 2 years before we got married. I tried to explain to her as best as I could all of the accommodations that she was going to have to make if you want to communicate well. And I think that that's a lot easier than for some couples in which the hard of hearing person has become late deafened. Do
Yeah.
you agree with me?
I do agree with you, Mike. I think you're right. The way that it sounds like you were able to approach it with your wife was you asked her to join you, right? You explained to her and you brought it to her awareness, and she it leaned into it, as I would say. And couples who don't have that experience, but it happens to them, they didn't get a chance to be prepared or to make the agreement and plan together. And sometimes it's a surprise. And we just kind of have to figure it out together. And that can be a lot harder than the alignment and the coming together. It's not the same, but I did go through that with my husband when I brought him into the family. I said, "You are going to have to learn to sign. You're you're just gonna have to. That's it. I'm not gonna interpret for you all the time. I'm not gonna sign for you all the time. You're gonna have to learn." And he knew right away when we started dating that that was an agreement he was buying into. But not everyone gets the chance to do that, and it can be hard when you don't.
That's right. Because I think one of the things that I've had to work on is not to allow my wife to become too dominant a partner. You know, it's very easy when you kind of go along to a doctor that's talking with a poor accent that he starts talking to her rather than to me because, and you know, there's times when you're going to need help in terms of phone calls and so forth. But I think you have to have an understanding with your partner. Yes, I want your help, but I also want to make sure that I can contribute.
Yes, advocating for yourself and making that agreement together that we are going to have a balance here, not just do what's easiest or do what might seem simple. Agreed. That advocating for yourself and alignment with your partner sounds like that's the key I'm taking away from what you shared, Mike. Thank you so much.
Dr. Fox,
Yes.
Dan Brooks has a question.
Yeah, of course.
I do. Maybe more of a suggestion or something that worked for me. Growing up and being busy lives and having kids and her working full time and I'm volunteering and working and trying to start a business and she'll say you got to be here and do this and that and I'll think I heard her correctly and then I find out later I didn't do what I was told or asked to do and I could tell you one thing that we've done is we shared our calendars on our phones. She puts in every little bit that she's got going on, everything that the kids got going on, everything I have going on. So on any given day or anything, I can look in there, she can do the same, and we know who's doing what and when and who has to do it. And it's all color coded and I can't tell you, we started this maybe a year ago. We've been married going on 17 years and this has really helped me a lot, and I'm sure it's helped her a lot, and it's really improved our relationship and allowed us to, make time for each other. We can find the gaps in the calendar or put it in the calendar and make sure we stick to it. But that calendar has helped us in so many ways. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. Those strategies and using technology to our advantage to reduce, misunderstandings or, extra steps, as I'll call them. And, I'll just speak from my experience. I believe in a lot of togetherness in a couple, and that's a benefit to any couple to share a calendar, to not just with hearing loss and reducing, misunderstandings, but making sure we're on the same page and that we have access to information equally at the same time. There's so many great things about that strategy alone for hearing loss or not, right? It just in general. So love that suggestion, Dan. I do it myself as well and find it to also be a godsend.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other final thoughts, suggestions, questions? I see a Zoom user. I didn't catch your name.
I believe that's Bess Herbert.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't know who you were
Oh, okay.
referring, but yes,
Yes,
thank
great.
you, Dan, yes, my name is, and I got my hand up. Well, thank you for a great presentation, and thank you for all the tricks, especially the calendar. And I do agree, it's really tough, especially when someone just says, "Oh, never mind, just go ignore it," and you're like, well, I'm trying my best to hear. It's not like I'm not listening. It's just I don't know why I can't hear, and it's not like my hearing loss was yesterday, but it's every time you have to like, okay, can you not play the music, please? My husband is hearing, and he loves music. In fact, he's not here today because there's Bruce Springsteen is in Buffalo, I believe. He's playing there, so he loves music, and everywhere on our family gatherings, there's a music that really makes it tough for me, for example, to hear anything. I mean, already have hard time hearing, but with the background noise, it's just like, impossible to hear what other person says, It's very challenging to explain to someone that, it's not that I don't like music, but I can't hear people. So.
Yes. Yes, and that's where, like you're talking about, like advocating for ourselves and, asking for what we need, right, is really hard to do. And if our partner is having a hard time being patient with us or understanding that, again, I think it as layers of challenges for communication. And this is, again, just my philosophy. I do my very best to try to be patient with others, no matter what the situation is, because I know one day I'm going to need it. And I've already gotten it, right, in life. So I like to think of it as a patience exchange. We're just exchanging patience with one another throughout this lifetime. We will all need it for different circumstances, for different reasons in our lifetime. So there's nothing wrong with giving it because you're going to need it at some point too. So maybe I think about it in a karma way, but I also think that, it's kind of an exchange of patience in this world. Thank you so much all for your sharing. Any final thoughts, comments, feedback, things to share with one another?
Charlie, did you set up an email where people can give feedback through the Zoom link?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, anybody through the Zoom link, there should be instructions on how to, send in your comments of this presentation and maybe any other ideas of other presentations you'd like to see. But I gotta say, I came in a few minutes late and I'm glad I came. And Megan, you did a wonderful job in this presentation. And thank you
Oh,
so much for doing this. It's kind of the first really for this organization to be working with somebody in mental health, and that has a special interest in people with hearing loss and deaf in our community. So terrific to know there's somebody like you that's here.
Oh,
So,
well,
thank
Dan,
you.
thank you so much. That's such a compliment. It really is a gift for me to be here. I feel so honored that you all had me and welcomed me. So please do provide your feedback. I really do take it in, and I really do want to know your suggestions, comments, things to share. That's really important to me. So please do complete the survey, not just for HLAA, but also for me. I really do appreciate that. Thank you so very much. It's been an honor.
Megan, I wanted to also thank you for being here tonight. I know you're a busy lady, but it's really important to be connected with someone in the mental health field, especially for people with hearing loss. I think that's a unique perspective. That's important for all of us, certainly. I also just wanted to plug for myself and the Boston chapter HLAA, I am going to be doing, if anyone wants to sign up for their meeting next Thursday at 6:30 p.m., I am going to be doing a speech reading class for that chapter. So, and that's kind of connected, you know, it's all about communication. So if anyone's interested, please look into that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so very much. It was really a pleasure to be here, everyone. Thank you so, so, so much. And please, I left my contact information and I'll share my presentation with you all so you can keep a copy of it as well. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And thank you, Suzanne, for putting this together.